Welcome to another episode of WTF. That's World of Taunton and Fox. Please note there was not a question mark. It's not WTF question mark. It's just WTF. And that means the world of Taunton and Fox. And I'm Taunton. And the guy with the funny accents, he's Fox. How are you, Laza?
I'm all right. I've just done all the gardening. We've had a big storm here and it's torn down. I thought rather emblematically or symbolically, I'm not really sure what it is, but when we moved into the house, I put a flagpole in the ground and I stuck our own flag like Americans do outside our house, and it was ripped down in the storm night before last. So I've just been trying to mend everything that's been torn to bits. I'm good, but I'm still reeling from I'm two things. I feel amazing we had a huge rally in London, a free speech rally, which was great. But I'm the reason for why free speech being so important in Charlie Kirk I'm still reeling about that. I can't even. You know what? I'm interested to know. Lizzie is watching like everything he ever said. She spends most of the day watching Charlie Kirk stuff, and the minute I hear it, I have to walk away, and I don't know why it is. I can't bear to hear anything. Makes me angry.
That's interesting because first of all, if you get your flag back up, you should put it at half mast. And secondly, I think that there has been a very strong reaction to Charlie's death, obviously. But the reason for it, I don't think it's because so many people, had known him personally. Obviously not. I think that it's because there was such an obvious innocence here, that he was a free speech advocate. He was such a nice, likable guy. And here he is talking reasonably with students. He's a young father, young husband. And he's a strong believer in the gospel. And he died like a martyr. I mean, Charlie Kirk is genuinely a Christian martyr. And I keep saying to people, it's important that you understand this. Charlie died for his faith, not for his politics. And that's because his Christian faith, his Christian convictions defined his politics, not his politics, his faith. And that's what's so important to understand here. And for a guy just sitting up on stage, enjoying engaging with students, obviously trying to point them to the cross, point them to Christ, point them to truth, point them to meaning. And then he shot in the throat. I think it's outraged our sense of justice. It has appalled us because it has laid bare the violence of the left. When we say we're engaged in a war and a battle, which sometimes I do, we mean it rhetorically. They don't mean it rhetorically. And for people who say that we shouldn't have guns, they sure do like shooting people with guns.
It's it is true, isn't it? If you think about it, I'm so angry. I don't even want to kind of go to the emotional side of me, because also you hear people who lack so much grace, and I people often criticize me for not being very gracious or graceful and all of that stuff, which I'm certainly not when it comes to dealing with what I see as the enemy. But then I think, how does that connect with faith? Charlie would go out and speak to people he disagreed with, and I think you will find that he had a huge influence materially had a huge influence in the outcome of the last election. So he did serve politically, but it's the fact that he took his civil discourse. He would get wound up with people and all that sort of stuff, but it was the fact that he just wanted to talk to people, and for that, because they couldn't beat his ideas, they murdered him. And I was left with several feelings, some of them selfish. One of the selfish feelings I was left with was, it's now okay to kill those that don't agree with you. So, and I think that's a Rubicon crossed. Certainly in the UK, the language, some of the more stupid politicians in the UK are using that sort of language. They're ramping it up. The appalling things that are said about him by this man Bob Vylan, who I think he just wants to be famous. He's a talentless microdict, mixed race rapper of some kind. But I think there's a target on all of our backs now. You've been swatted. We've been through that. We've spoken to people about that. And the thing is, if you're not going to agree with us, we're going to kill you. Makes me think, well, how do you defend yourself? Because what did Jesus do? He just went, kill me then.
Yeah, well, that puts it very well. I've known for quite a while, because of threats against my own life, attempts to take my life, that this is the way the left operates, and also because of my engagement, debating Muslims in places like Hyde Park, where the radicals gather on Sunday afternoons at Speaker's Corner. I've taken them on down there on several occasions, hundreds. Coming around. There's no belief in free speech in that. But I will say that and then you've had a different type of threat against you. It's been, let's just litigate him, into oblivion. Let's just smear him in the newspapers. Let's do these kinds of things. I think what has happened here, that if there's good that's coming out of this, one is, I think that there's a genuine revival that's taking place, spiritual revival. The second thing is, I think it has awakened people who, were just not really paying close attention to what was happening in this country, who thought, the rhetoric of both sides is a problem. Yeah, both sides are extreme. That both side-ism, kind of stuff that's going on, it's awakened people. Oh, wow. I realize now that, I agreed with Charlie Kirk, and that means they want me dead. So I think that has awakened people. If you'll permit me, I like to read to you, which might be a jumping off point to a conversation here about anger, which I know is something the two of us were discussing, offline. But it's an open letter response that I've written to a guy by the name of Phil Vischer. Now, I don't know if Phil Vischer is known in the UK, but Phil Vischer is the creator of something called VeggieTales. VeggieTales are these little, sort of cartoon characters that told Bible stories. My children grew up watching them. A lot of children.
I heard Phil Vischer had to say about this. Yeah.
Okay. So Phil Vischer is one of the sorts that I just simply can't stand, because he's one of these progressive Christians. And I don't know that the guy ever actually was a Christian. That's another thing. But he's one of these people who, in the wake of Charlie's murder, thought that it was his role to be the hall monitor, to go onto Twitter and to lecture Christians about their tone. Now, bear in mind, since Charlie's death, looking at my watch now, day 6, there have been 0 cities burned, 0 stores looted, 0 people murdered. We are not the same as the left. So, and Phil read my book, The Faith of Christopher Hitchens, and he's been kind of obsessed with my opinion on things, and decides to sort of come in and snipe every now and then that, Larry, your tone, what you were just talking about, that some people say this to you. So here is my Christian response to him. And if you'll indulge me for just a moment here. Phil, you're like every wolf in sheep's clothing that I've encountered in the church. You're all about tone, not truth. Jesus, let's not turn over any tables. It's offensive to the moneylenders. What you call disparagement is righteous anger. I'm outraged at the annihilation of the unborn, the mutilation of children, and the murder of innocents. But to you, it's about tone. I do not treat evil opinions with respect. I call them out, debate them, mock them, and endeavor to demolish the arguments, 2 Corinthians 10:5, because often those promoting them feast on the blood of innocents. But you be you, Phil. I'm fascinated by the fact that you immediately brought race into the discussion, a topic I had neither mentioned nor inferred. And you did it in the typical condescending manner of the leftist who thinks non-whites need your help. And that's because at bottom, you are a racist. Where you see skin color, I am incidentally severely colorblind, I see those who know Christ and those who do not. The least of these and those who oppress them, and those who obey the law and those who break it. The left has encouraged violence of every sort, and unsurprisingly, yet another innocent was murdered in cold blood. The murderer was, it seems, a typical American kid from a typical American home who was radicalized, weaponized, and sent out as an assassin to do exactly what Democrats wanted him to do. Do not be deceived. They want more of the same. A wife has been widowed, her children made fatherless, and those parts of the world where conscience has not yet been killed mourn and are justly angry. Angry, Phil. A proper sentiment in these times. But what do? You take to Twitter to lecture Christians on their tone, and like the serpent in the garden, to ask leading questions with an evil intent. Did God actually say? You can engage me, Phil, in open debate, but you cannot engage me as a follower in Christ. He had said, I can't gauge you as a follower in Christ because of your tone. You can't engage me as a follower in Christ because you're not a follower of Christ, whatever your former commitments might have been. You and your cohort of Russell Moore and David French are evil men. Indeed, you all remind me of a quotation from C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Quote, the greatest evil is not now done in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not done even in concentration camps and labor camps, and those we see its final result. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clean, carpeted, warmed, and well-lit offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voices. End quote. That describes a lot of you perfectly. Possessed of your own self-righteousness, emanating arrogance built on theological deception, and supported by those who use you to demoralize God's people, you are apostates at best. That is, if you ever believe the gospel at all. You are all the church's equivalent of Tokyo Rose. You say that you like my book, The Faith of Christopher Hitchens. Thank you. But you cannot reconcile the author of that book with my, quote, Twitter persona. Your failure to do so, Phil, is because you didn't understand the book. My relationship with Christopher was made possible because of a mutual respect built on authenticity. I didn't pretend to be something other than a Christian, and he didn't pretend to be something other than an atheist. There's honesty in that. He knew and appreciated my concern for his soul was real, and then I engaged him to that end. Christopher liked that. He would have rightly thought me a fraud had I done otherwise. That's why I know he would have liked Charlie Kirk very much. But he reviled people like you because you're snakes. Worse, you're smug snakes. As an aside, I once shared a stage with Russell Moore at an apologetics conference, I think, in 2007. Guess the focus of his talk that night? The evils of VeggieTales. I recall this line from his presentation. I would rather people watch Desperate Housewives than VeggieTales. Check the tape. I was your defender that night. Moore has come a long way since then, justifying, like you, every evil Democrat agenda. But we shouldn't be surprised. We now know that he was a paid operative. Moore is a charlatan. So if you find my words not to your liking, and it isn't because I'm out for clicks, as you suggest, or motivated by some other nefarious reason, it's because I believe the gospel to the marrow of my bones, and I'm outraged by those who prey on the vulnerable. That's because you and your ilk, in spite of your many claims to the contrary, don't care for them. I watched you in a podcast talking about open borders and illegals in the country with the confidence of a man who knew the subject intimately. But it's easy, isn't it, in the safe confines of your life? I was in the jungles of South and Central America and in the cartel towns engaging those illegals and those who trafficked in them. I don't recall seeing you there, Phil. And yes, I meant every word that I wrote. To reiterate, if you're a Democrat today, you're evil, stupid, or both. The Democrat Party has always been the party of slavery. History has established that fact. But now they're the party of murder. They encourage murder, fund murder, and revel in murder. Do all its 60 million members do that? No, but they're enablers of it. They turn a blind eye, just as millions turned a blind eye to their Jewish neighbors as they were dragged into the streets and sent to death camps. You're one of them, Phil. You have chosen to align yourself with reprobates who have denied God in every conceivable way. In closing, I want to be clear. I make no claims of moral superiority to you or anyone else. I'm saved by the blood of Jesus Christ alone. But I know very well his call upon my life, and it is in part to demolish the insidious arguments of people like you and give voice to the voiceless. And no matter your pretensions to the contrary, you speak on behalf of power and on behalf of the establishment. I suspect you're paid to do so, but all the threads of USAID and Soros monies haven't yet been traced. Final question. How many people have tried to kill you for your opinions, Phil? I've had more than a few, twice this year alone. So too a number of my colleagues. Charlie, sadly, was just the latest in a long line of murder attempts, and to our great grief, his outcome was different than our own. You're an enemy of God and therefore his people. I hope you'll repent. And if you want to debate me publicly, I will arrange it. But I should be honest with you. I don't respect your opinions, and I revile what you represent. I can have and have had genuine respect for declared enemies, but I have none for those who pretend to be of us when they're manifestly nothing of the sort. Thank you for your patience in letting me read that. But I think that sentiment, it's a righteous rage that we feel. And Ephesians 4:26 says this, be angry and do not sin. Be angry and do not sin, meaning that anger has a place in the life of the Christian, but you don't let it go to, your anger shouldn't spill over to murder. It shouldn't spill over to, some evil end. But certain things, if they don't anger you, there's something wrong with you.
I think you should probably have, told Phil really how you felt. And, always holding back is tiresome. The interesting thing, I wanted to pick up on it. Read me just the last 3 sentences in closing bit. In closing,
the part about debating him.
Just go in closing.
The in closing part. In closing, I want to be clear that I make no claims of moral superiority or to you or anyone else. Is that what you're talking about?
I know what it was.
I am saved by the blood of Jesus Christ alone.
I know what it was. It's so we've spoken about this before, but it is very, very true. Those who pretend, the wolf in sheep's clothing part creates an anger even greater almost than the anger that you have at someone thinking that by shooting someone in the throat, they're somehow doing the world a favor. Like ridding the world of a Nazi or a fascist or whatever we get called this week. But these people, these Phils, a lot of people in search of power and influence who turn around and will try and straddle the fence of truth. And the fence, I just find that makes me even more angry. And I don't want to live in anger because I don't think it's good for you. I think, but at this one juncture, I feel at this juncture, I mean, it's been building up to all of this, but at this juncture, I feel so anybody who has called Charlie Kirk a Nazi has contributed to his murder. Anyone with a high profile is an accomplice in his murder. But at the same time, I don't want to attack free speech. I want people to be able to express things and call people whatever they want to call them. I think it's really
there are consequences for free speech. You can have free speech, but there are consequences for that. And the left wants to say, gosh, people are being fired. People are being fired. The right supposedly believes in free speech. No. You guys want to be able to say what you want that leads to killing of us, people on our side. And then when you face consequences for that, you think we shouldn't lose our job. How many university professors standing in front of their classrooms? There's one who apparently was showing this, murder of Charlie Kirk over and over and over again. This shows that you're a reprobate. There's moral responsibility in teaching youth. And if you're showing this over and over again and celebrating it, you don't belong in a classroom. But if you want to go do that somewhere, you have the right to do it. But there's consequences for that.
I agree. Well, but this was the argument used against me when I said that England was a warm, welcoming, and tolerant country. They said, well, you can speak freely, but we're going to take your career away from you. Tough. And I was like, yeah, but I didn't. I just said that we're a nice country. Now I'm just much more open, which is weird. One of the things that has very much happened is it's no longer really a political debate to me. It's the spiritual war, but and it's a good versus evil thing. But I can now look at people. I'll use two examples. A woman who did a little video after the big rally we did on the weekend. She went, I find it so interesting that, blackness is something one can be really proud of. You must be really proud of being black, but you absolutely can't be proud of being white. And she said, I find that fascinating. And you can be proud of your ethnic minority status, but you can't be proud of being British. She says, I find it really interesting. We all know why that is, and all of the, sort of Islamo-Marxism that leads to that. But she was black when she said this. And then a brown man, the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, starts talking about our flag. You'd never hear a leftist talking about our flag. They've not mentioned our flag ever. And he sits there and talks about we must not let the far right, hard right take away our flag. And I looked at him in a different way as I've looked at him before. I looked at him and I thought, you're not British. You don't belong to me. You're not part of my country. I don't want you here. I don't want you anywhere near my country. I don't want you holding positions of authority in my country. I then look at other people and I've started to look at people in a very tribalistic way. I thought I was a civic nationalist. I had these conversations over the weekend, one with Carl Benjamin, who's really wonderful. You should talk to him. And he said, no, you're not a civic nationalist. You're a tribalist. You're like, you don't care who's in your tribe as long as they agree to the way that the tribe operates. And Britons as a tribe operate in a certain way. And therefore you can welcome a lot of people into your tribe. But and we have a Home Secretary called Shabina Mahmood. She speaks more about Pakistan or the well-being of Pakistan and Gaza than she speaks about anything else.
You're Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, Ilhan Omar. And I'm like, I don't want you here. Leave. Go. And it's become very binary. I'm just like, but then this young black girl who's talking about, why she just opposes leftism and minority victimization anyway. I'm like, you're fine. But these people who are trying to rip your country apart from within, the sheeps in wolves' clothing on the other side, or the wolves in, actually, they are sheeps in wolves' clothing. I find I have no tolerance for anymore. I'm like, if your way of dealing with a problem by killing someone, leave, get out of my country. And if we have to deal with of a minority of those that exist within the British tribe who behave badly, then we can do that via our own justice system. But to import people who hate our country, I find repellent. And yesterday I got sent a video because we've had this huge, overwhelming thing of people putting flags up. England has turned into the US. It's been absolutely glorious to see. You can't go 10 feet without seeing a Union Jack or a St. George's flag. And the local councils are taking them down. And I was sent a video of this happening. And this man is furious. And what I found so ironic was the people that were taking down the flags were Eastern European migrants. And they were ordered to do so by foreign Islamic councillors.
Of course.
And it was like your country is being destroyed in front of your very eyes. And even the own apologist appeaser fills on our own side sit there and they will demean their own people who are trying to do them a favor because they're so cowardly. They will demean them as far right and extreme. And we saw the biggest protest in British history. Certainly in.
I saw the images on your feed. They look amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was by far the biggest protest that London has ever seen. And maybe the Iraq War protest had similar numbers, but No, it was the biggest one ever. And they still sit there, the establishment media, and they call us extremists. And I'm like, if we had clicked a finger that day, if we had gone back and we'd sat together and gone, you know what we should ask them to do? Let's storm Downing Street. Let's go in there. Let's break the door down. Let's do a January the 6th. If we could have done that tomorrow. I know January the 6th. When I say January the 6th, I know it's syllogistically. It's, that could have happened. And they still wake up the next morning and they go, you're all disgusting. And I'm like, when are you guys going to wake up to the fact that the overwhelming majority of people are furious with you? And when are you going to understand how fragile your position is? When are they going to realize that? Because the next one, the tone, the numbers grow, and the tone, that even though there was very, very, very little violence other than perpetrated by the police, who do it deliberately, they kettle off certain groups of people and they attack them violently because the police are thugs. What do they think is going to happen next time? It's going to be even more people, and this time it's not going to be able to be reined in. They're being warned. And I find it insane that they still want to call us extremists and far right. Yeah. So the protest was incredible. It was it's so brilliant. Tommy Robinson, who's a much loathed figure by the establishment, is a much loved figure by the people, because he's a servant leader. You know, he literally, down to handing out your little pass. The thing that made me laugh the most was when we booked a place for us all to stay, because we were worried about security, right? So we had to book a place in London as a rallying point for us to start at. And the guy that booked it told us told the venue that we were holding a property conference there. So when it turned up, and the whole place was, I mean, you know, it's feverish. It was like that. They were pretty livid. So it was funny. But he got right down to looking out for people. It goes up to everybody, checks they're okay, is looking up, really knows how to treat people, is very, very generous, a true, wonderful servant leader. And he brought in, it was interesting, he brought in a lot of European politicians as well to speak. And there's just a huge amount of rage now from the British people that they've been ignored totally for decades. And I think that rage can only deepen, because they're going to realize that not only have they been ignored for decades, they've been ignored forever. And the problem is, that's where socialism actually comes from, isn't it? Socialism comes from this idea that there's a ruling elite, and, you know, the people can overturn the whole thing. So you do skate the line about, you know, well, maybe there are some good things about the sort of socialist idea, which aren't, obviously we know it leads to nowhere. But the idea that as the more people wake up, the more people realize it hasn't just been over immigration. It's been over the idea of socialized healthcare. It's been over the idea of education, full stop. It's been over the idea of the judiciary, the legal system, policing, the military, war. And the more you begin to wake up to the way that your taxes have been used to serve everyone's interests except your own, the more furious everybody becomes. And I think that there was a very delicate relationship between the state media industrial complex, wasn't there? You know, it was very carefully colluded. A narrative was formed like on a spinning wheel, and it was delivered to the public to take on board. And now social media gets in the way of that. And one of the ways people denigrate social media is they go, well, yeah, not everyone's on Twitter. Well, nobody said there was going to be a march in the mainstream media. No one said there was going to be a march on any British news channel at all. And yet somehow you ended up with the best part of 1 million people on the streets of London. So social media has broken that nexus between these mutually beneficial colluding establishment forces. And every political party has realized that there is no way they can avoid the truth anymore. And I think for that, Elon Musk deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. You know, it's amazing.
Well, the images that you posted, one, I think it was from behind you. You look like Freddie Mercury, you know, with your hands up in a just looked like, the whole population of London, excuse me, that was there. And, something you just said that I think is so important here for people to understand is what you're seeing in Britain of ignoring constituents. This is the playbook they're all following all over the Western world. All over the Western world is they're obviously being coached. Ignore your constituents. Indeed, show contempt for your constituents. That's what's happened in Brazil. It's what's happened in Mexico. It's what's happened in Colombia. It's what's happened in the United States, in Canada, in Britain, in Germany, in Spain, in France, in Italy until Giorgia Meloni was elected. That is the playbook they're following. They're told, stay the globalist course. Keep following the strategy and just shut out the noise. And what's interesting is when you read some of the books, some of the white papers, that have been put out by members of the World Economic Forum, which is a focus for me, you discover that this is part of the strategy, is part of the playbook, that they're telling them, look, you guys have been far too sensitive. The reason we haven't been able to follow through with our globalist agenda is because you're far too sensitive to what the electorate says. Ignore them. Just completely ignore them and keep moving forward. And of course, the quiet part is we'll also redistrict, gerrymander, rig elections, all these kinds of things so that you don't have to worry about what they think. Tell me this, Tommy Robinson, who you just described, never met him. I can't claim to know a great deal about him other than what I hear from you and maybe a few things that I've seen online. He's obviously become something of a pop. Pop is the wrong word. Folk hero, folk icon, for populists. He strikes me as a guy that needs to be pretty careful walking through crowds and so forth. I mean, he seems like someone who would be a very genuine Charlie Kirk-like target. Am I right?
Yeah, you are. The more that I think we're witnessing, as you said, post Charlie Kirk, there have been no cities burned down, no nothing. So we're aware of the fact that on our side of the argument, we don't believe that problems are solved by killing and murdering other people or setting fire to their houses. But on the left, they very much do. And as their narrative is destroyed, and as people turn towards truth, and they realize that there are the overwhelming things that I hear from people are worries about their children. They constantly talk about their children. I'm worried that my children are going to be fighting on the streets. I've heard that from so many people, like the Balkans. They think that it'll all kick off. Tommy Robinson is someone who was one of the very first people to start talking about the gangs in Britain. He was one of the very first people to start talking about the fact that the culturally self-isolated, hardcore Islamic community were destroying the social fabric in the country. And immediately they called him a racist for it. And since then, they pursued him criminally, civilly, and in any possible way they can to utterly destroy his life. And prior to this march, he was just released from prison for a completely egregious so-called contempt of court, which is just utter rubbish, which was the establishment, again, trying to shut him up about the way a Syrian boy behaved in a school, and it was just appalling, and Tommy was absolutely right to do it. But the thing about him is he doesn't care. He said to me before he did it, before he committed the contempt of court, also we rely. The other thing is we're relying on the British court relies on the belief and the consensus of the British people that they're doing it blindly, for the benefit of all, but nobody believes it anymore. So he told me he said, I'm going to show the film. And I said, well, it's your choice. You must do what you feel is right. But he said, they will put me in jail for this. They'll put me in prison for this. And they did. And he spent his time in jail and he came out and he's come out punching harder, stronger, fighting more. And someone did try and get him at a train station. Fortunately, it's one of the few times I am pleased that we don't have guns in the UK, because it would be harder to get your hand on a gun. I think we were all a bit apprehensive that there might have been someone in the crowd, or might have been someone somewhere who would manage to do something dreadful. But there's something about the English which, when it gets to that point, then you're going to have a proper, it won't just be governments putting down civil disturbances. It'll be a full-blown almighty civil war in the United Kingdom, where a lot.
Well, I don't know that it'd be somebody who's from Britain, who would take him on.
No, someone who's in Britain.
It would be a Muslim. Not that there aren't British Muslims, but let's say a more recent arrival of that persuasion who might try to kill him. But perhaps I'm wrong.
Well, I told you, didn't I, that I talk about this a lot, because I lived in London for a very long time, and I saw it change unrecognizably. And London now, the surrounding parts of London are. I was where I lived with my girlfriend of 7 years, my first long-term girlfriend, back when I was 19. I went to that area the other day. I drive through that area when I drive down to London to take meetings. And a guy who'd recently off a boat tried to attack me, steal my phone really quickly. There's no English spoken. There is just the sound of mosques and prayer. It's not England. It's not Britain. It's not it. It just sort of. And Tommy pointed it out, and also pointed out the way that councils are infiltrated. Well, down to the point, yes, I think I did a video about this and it went mental. I was looking at my food the other day, and I looked at it, and appears at the bottom of my food this new number. And I'm like, what does that mean? Not seen that before. So I type in the number into artificial intelligence. I go, what does this mean? And it says, oh, that's a halal slaughterhouse. No mentioning on the packaging of my beef steaks that they've been some... Allahu Akbar has been sat there going, Allahu Akbar before they cut the poor animal's throat and surges its body with adrenaline. We have been completely overtaken. And Tommy has been the person who has said, if you allow this to carry on, our children will end up fighting in the streets, and that's what will happen. And I think people now realize it. More and more people realize it. They know that if they don't stand up now, the next stage is not peaceful. The next stage is violent, and it's protecting your homeland from an invading force. There are more people who have arrived on boats in the last few years than there are in the entire British Army. We're talking about being held in hotels across the country. You're talking about more people than there are in the whole British Army. What do you do in that situation? If you're Tommy, you point it out. If you're me, you warn of the dangers of that. And what happens? The establishment come after you and try and destroy you and put you in prison. So, at some point, the centre cannot hold. It's all out. It will turn nasty. I can promise you.
What has been the British response, both official and unofficial, to the assassination of Charlie Kirk? Was he known there?
Hugely. And what's so brilliant is I'll give you two stories which are funny. One from my stepdaughter and one from my son. So my son, I was with my son the night he was shot. We were hanging out. It was an evening where we were together, and it appeared. My phone started going ping, 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 and I saw, and I was like, "Oh my Lord!" My son's like, "We've got to pray for him." So I thought, wow, I would never have said we need to pray for anyone at 14. And he knew who Charlie Kirk was. And very similarly, what he did was, after I said, I don't think he's going to survive that looks very bad as a wound. I don't think he's going to be sad. He said, why would someone kill someone? Why would someone kill someone just because they disagree? He was going to have conversations and talk to people. You don't kill people. And then he's on the path of truth and righteousness, turning towards truth anyway. And then he was so unbelievably shocked by how cruel people were immediately. And that upset him as much as as the callous and cowardly act of murder was the fact that people were glorifying murder. And then I just thought how wonderful. He knows a lot about Charlie Kirk, probably because, he's been around me. But my stepdaughter hasn't spent a long time around me and my political stuff. She doesn't know a great deal about it. She knows all about who Charlie Kirk was. She was absolutely straight on it. She's a huge defender of Trump. She's a big defender. And you're like, I've not told you that. So there is a golden generation of young British people who are not getting there. I don't think if you asked my stepdaughter what the BBC was, she'd be able to tell you. They've never heard of it. Anyone under 16 in this country has no idea what the BBC is. And the official line is from these scummy, horrible people like Adam Bolton, who's the head of Sky News, political reporting. He's like, why does anyone care about this? This is an American problem. And it's like, and then people just dig out his Twitter feed from Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. And it's like, people are just saying to him, you cared a lot about George Floyd, who was an armed, robbing, drug addict fraudster. You cared a lot about him. But Charlie Kirk, who was actually famous, you want us to forget about. Screw you. Then you get another guy, Gavin Esler, who used to be Channel 4 News, and the narrative just stops working. And we, on our side, have been punching back at the media, saying, you're dying. No one cares about you. You look for a job in a mid-level men's suit store between $200 and $500 to sell craps lycra suits or something, because you are finished. You're over. And they're not being cancelled, these people. They're cancelling themselves by lying. So Britain loved Charlie Kirk. I think people in China will be watching Charlie Kirk on VPNs. I think people across the world will have been watching Charlie Kirk because he was the bridge, wasn't he? He was the bridge. He was one of the very few. I mean, the Daily Wire guys do it. You obviously do it. But, they go out and they speak to people who disagree with them, and they enjoy doing that and trying to change people's minds. Stephen Crowder does it. But Charlie Kirk was and as Michael Knowles has said and many others have said, I don't know whether you agree, but he would have been president one day, And so our reaction over here, the media want to tell us, who is this Charlie Kirk guy? And we're all going, we know exactly who he is. Don't try your bull narrative on us anymore. It doesn't work. We're very bored of the way that we're very bored of being patronized by your ridiculous sort of narrative that you keep trying to get us to swallow. Yeah, no one buys it. No one buys it is the answer. How's America feeling?
It's been a much stronger reaction than even the attempted assassination of Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I come back to, what I said at the beginning, which is, I think that that strong reaction has to do with the innocent nature of, what he was engaging in the moment he was shot, and the images of, his young, beautiful wife and his young, beautiful children, and that he was such a nice, likable guy. I don't know if you ever met Charlie. I can't claim to have known him well. I had dinner with him at Mar-a-Lago. I met him down there and chatted with him and enjoyed nice conversation with him. He was exactly, offstage what he appeared to be on it, which is to say sincere, outgoing, liked people. You know this far better than I do, that there are many celebrity types who, when you meet them, I mean, you've told me several stories from your acting career about people. For those who are unaware of this, Laurence and I will be having a conversation or watching a movie, and I'll say, "Oh, I like her," and he says, "Oh yeah, well, she's a total." And I'll be thinking, okay, well, she seems, very nice. Well, Larry, she's an actress. She's good at making you think what she wants you to think. But Charlie Kirk was a guy that was exactly offstage what he was on it. And he was pleasant. That was a good one. That was a very good one. He was pleasant. He was warm. He was sincere. His desire was to lead people to Jesus Christ. And so for a guy to be shot down in the midst of doing exactly that, it's all the more horrifying for people. And in this country, the response has been very, very powerful and sincere, rather than the coerced, mourning for George Floyd, who was a criminal. All but 5 NFL teams, the NFL, which has adopted just about every progressive agenda, they had some kind of moment of silence or observation for Charlie Kirk. That to me is interesting. You're seeing a strong response against those who are celebrating it. And those people are facing consequences. So I think that this is becoming, the kind of movement that you're describing, where you have all these hundreds of thousands or millions of Britons in the streets. I think that's what's happening here. And rather than it being rent-a-mobs, it's a genuine outpouring of rage, of horror, of grief, of righteous anger, where people really want to see change because they're aware suddenly that there are evil people in their midst, that there are evil people there. They're not just people who are way over there. They're here. They're teachers of their kids. They're administrators in their government. They're people at their doctor's office, or a lawyer or local businessman who are celebrating these things. And I think people are thinking, oh wow, I had no idea that there were these kinds of evil people right here in my own community. And it's a wake-up call for people. That's cliche, but it applies here.
But it absolutely does, because that, I think that's the sentiment I'm echoing from my son, which is that obviously the horror at the shooting, which is, I think young people, even though they have social media, I think they think the idea of taking up a weapon and harming someone is still a very difficult thing. You've got war poetry that sort of glorifies heroism, and you've got war poetry that says dreadful. And when you're young, you're idealistic and you think about fighting. But what they can get their head around is bullying. A young person can spot a bully a mile off, and his revulsion. What's turning him all the time, and what's turning a lot of my friends, kids of the same age, is that the intolerance, the hatred, and the modus operandi of these people. And in a way, I'm very grateful for it, because I want to see that. I want to see our the golden generation, which is what I referred to in my speech. I said there is a golden generation coming, and we have a duty to them. I want to see them emboldened and know that there is an enemy, and know that enemy wants them dragged out of their houses, put up against a wall and shot, and know how to defend themselves against that. And on the other hand, I don't want to goad them into being, behaving just as the left want us to behave, which is the way they behave. The left would love it nothing more if we burned down a few cities and got rid of it. But the right way of dealing with it is the Trump way of dealing with it, which is I'm going to go into Chicago. I'm going to go and clean that city up. These young black men do not deserve to die at the rates they're dying. We're going to go and clean that up, and we're going to sort it out for you.
The fact that conservatives don't do that is why they have to invent it with Jussie Smollett, fraudulent claims. How many of those have there been? And a January 6th type nonsense. That's what they have to do. They have to create it, they have to choreograph it, they have to direct it, because it's not real.
Yeah. Well, but actually, I think I was having this thought the other day. I was like, why are they not at all offended by their own hypocrisy? And I thought to myself, okay, imagine yourself as a leftist, because I love doing that. It's so much fun. I would take my hypocrisy as a virtue. I would say, well, in a world which I want to change, my hypocrisy, my breaking of their stupid rules like timeliness and good manners are signs of whiteness and all that crap, it's actually a virtue, your hypocrisy, because it actually shows how revolutionary you are. So if you think as a leftist, you can pretty much logically explain away everything in the universe except reality. They always struggle a little bit with reality, but I think they think, yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. Well, he had to die. If you say something I don't agree with, you should die. I'll kill you. That's just the way it is. I'm right. I'm trying to make the world a better place, mate. Therefore, if you need to get shot in the neck because you're trying to, come to us with your evil dissemination of progressivism and trying to return it to some ancient, stupid sky wizard, we have to kill you. You deserve it. We need to kill you. And it's like, oh, okay. So young people, my thing is, my hope, because I have to live in hope. I sense a lot of hope at the speed that people are waking up to this, and especially young people, because I spend a lot of time with them, and I listen to them talking, and I know what they're talking about, and I'm yet to meet a young leftist, and I was very, very progressive when I was their age. I was like, come on, man, love everyone, change the world, make it a better place. These guys are not like that at all. They are a different generation. They're empowered, and they're genuinely aware of how the fake world that they watch on social media spills over into the real world, because they see bullying on social media of someone who's got caught in a silly situation on whatever, and they're bullied, and then they see someone bullying the wife of a man who's just been shot in the neck. It's like they find that they know what that is. And they know it's evil. And that's it. A child needs to understand just enough evil for their own age limit. And I don't think they can understand assassinations particularly. I think children go, well, but you shoot people in war. Why is that any different? And it's like, it's hard to explain, but they understand bullying, and they understand people being bullied to death. So I'm very, very hopeful for my sons and for other people's sons and daughters across Britain, because we have had enough. And I think America's probably the same, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Let's drill down into something that you said at the beginning, which I wholly agree with. And that's this, that everyone who called Charlie a fascist bears some degree of responsibility for his assassination. Explain that. Explain your thinking.
Well, again, if your righteousness is defined more by your outward deeds, so if your righteousness is I want to save the planet, but I will take a first class flight to New York, it's like save the planet for thee, but not for me. Then to call somebody a fascist is to nobly denounce the enemy. But to some people, to call somebody a fascist, their noble action is to eliminate the fascist. Not that they know what a fascist is in the first place anyway, poor little loves. They just listen to what's told by their silly teachers. But that level of rhetoric will inspire a certain number of people. And, we're hearing about the nature of this young monster's relationships and affiliations with certain ideologies to act out on that. And if you live in a climate where, silence, they talk about silence is violence, silence is complicity, allyship. You've got to be on side with this piece. You have to be on side with that person. And if you're not against that person, they're the most evil person in the world. Someone's going to end up killing them, which is what happens. So they are complicit. I'm not the best person to talk about it, because my rhetoric is pretty strong, because I think it's absolutely fine. I denounce these people as demonic cultists in the main. And I think that's a pretty high-end rhetoric of my own. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to talk about it, but I think, language has consequences. It does. What does it say about words in the Bible? What's that great verse? Which is it? You'll know. Come on. I keep wanting to talk about wiser serpents, but it's not that. That's not what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I'll find it and I'll let you know.
Give me, characterize it for me, and maybe I'll think of it.
Well, it's about the evil you do with your mouth. Words, the evil of words.
Well, James in the book of James, it talks about the tongue. Yeah. Is like it's a small thing, but it's like a rudder, that steers a ship, or it's like a bit in the mouth that moves the horse, and that it has the ability to set whole forests ablaze. Mm-hmm. That the power of our words are extraordinary. This is maybe feels a little esoteric, but it fascinates me because in Greek thought, words are, abstract. In Hebrew thought, they're concrete. So they don't have abstract meaning. They have real, tangible meaning. So that, excuse me, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning was God. So we have in John chapter 1, it's in the beginning was the Word. So John is he's not plagiarizing Genesis 1. What he's doing is he is signaling his reader, who were Jewish largely, though not exclusively, who'd be familiar with Genesis chapter 1, and he's redirecting them just a little bit. In the beginning was the Word. Calvin translated that as in the beginning was the speech. In the beginning was the speech. So the words themselves are concrete. And then he says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, in the person of Jesus. So, he translated himself. Jesus translated himself into our culture, into our world. He condescended to become one of us because we had no ability to become like him. So it was going to require him to come down to us. But that to me is so interesting and significant, that God himself is defined as the Word, and that God's words are eternal, and that what is codified into the Ten Commandments is our use of words, where you would think, that we treat words in, modern day Western culture as just throwaway and insignificant. And yet God says in the Ten Commandments, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. You will not bandy about my name casually. When you use my name, it better be because you're referring to me. You're talking about me. And that to me is so powerful and so significant.
I've always wondered so I know what in vain means. It's like in vain is to do something. It's difficult. It's different with an invocation, but in vain, to do anything in vain is to do it. In my understanding of the English language and language in general, is that you do something consciously, but pointlessly.
Well, in this sense, it means a little bit different. What you're saying is true, but in this sense, it means using it as a profanity, using it as a way of, that you're not using God's name to refer to him in a holy way. I mean, the Jews wouldn't even write the name of God. They would use dots, which is called a tetragrammaton, which was just a way of indicating that God's name would go here in the text, but his name was so holy. And God is saying there in the Ten Commandments, if you use my name, it better be in a holy way, that you're referring to me, rather than because you're speaking, you're using it as an expletive in some other way. If you say this, it better be because you mean God needs to damn this. This is a damnable thing. This is an awful thing. Yeah. Some will think that what I've done right there is that I've actually used God's name in vain. And I know I meant it very literally. Very literally. There are things that God will damn.
Which does
damn. So you better not use that phrase in a way that is an expletive, that's just a throwaway comment because he's going, no, 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 no. You can do that with some other things. And that's why I always make the distinction when I'm talking with kids. There's a difference between vulgar language, which is defined by culture. And then there's taking God's name in vain, which is not defined by culture. It's defined by God himself. And meaning it's true for all time across cultures. It's universal. So if you want to use hell and shit and things like that, those are vulgarisms that are defined by the culture. But if you're going to use his name, it better be because you're talking about him, and it better be in a holy way. And that's why I often say to people, who will say, Larry, your language gets a little salty. I would say, you will never, ever hear me take God's name in vain. You will never hear me do that. But do I, on some occasions, does my language get a little salty because I'm angry or I'm frustrated? Yes. And I'm using it to some effect. The currency becomes cheap when there's too much of it in circulation. We're just dropping F-bombs all over the place and that kind of thing. It becomes completely meaningless. Sometimes I find in some movies and TV shows, it's like, are the script writers, do they really is their vocabulary so impoverished that this is all they have? That's all they can come up with. I always thought that with my father didn't yell and scream at his children as a rule, but when he did, it had an effect because it wasn't what he did all the time. And when he brought certain, expletives into the conversation, it got your attention because you knew, okay, he's seriously angry and I had better do what he's asking me to do here. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, and also I think the thing that I find kind of comforting for it is that it's true across. I know it's true because it's true across not just the spiritual realm, but it's true across the practical realm as well. If you make an invocation, a serious invocation, over and over and over again in the secular world, the invocation stops meaning anything. So if you say
it's cheap.
Yeah, it cheapens it. As you say, it inflates the currency of language to devalue it so much that it doesn't mean anything anymore. I also like the fact that, it gives what I wanted to talk about this whole time, which we are talking about in a way which is
we're nibbling at the edges,
which is where is the anger appropriate, acceptable, and sanctioned. And so do not take the Lord's name in vain doesn't say do not take the Lord's name. It says do not take it in vain.
Yes.
And
that's a key distinction.
You have to know what the Lord's name means. You have to know the Lord, and therefore it puts a Christian on an entire journey into knowing the Lord, and that's the most important thing, And it's but the flip side of it is it helps anybody to understand that if you take any invocation in vain, it's going to become meaningless after a while. And I think along with the do not worship false idols, it's the same thing. It's like if you start worshiping or allowing people even to worship things. So I'm always looking for the proactive. It's like, don't worship false idols. The implication from that is also don't allow people to worship false idols. Because if they do, you are complicit in the worship of false idols. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I do. And I think, listen, in my open letter to Phil Vischer, I invoke God's name a number of times there. I'm doing it biblically, and I'm doing it with holy reverence. And that's a key difference here. As for anger, we see quite a lot of anger expressed by God throughout Scripture. We see Jesus express anger. Now, there is often the distinction, when we were talking on the phone yesterday, I was thinking about this afterwards. You had mentioned quite rightly, Jesus said as they were crucifying him, forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yeah.
I can't help but notice in the Gospels, Jesus's response to an offense towards him and those towards innocence were different. And in that, Scripture says that we're made in God's image. And that means something beyond a physical resemblance, but we have certain characteristics, emotions, and so forth that are consistent with God. And it's easier, isn't it, for us to forgive an offense towards us than it is towards someone we love.
Yeah.
If someone does something to Lizzie, and maybe is able to say it's not a big deal, but you can harbor that for quite a while. And it's why I often tell young couples, listen, when you're in a fight, don't get on the phone with your parents. Don't get on the phone with your parents.
Such a good piece of advice.
Don't do that, because the next day you and your spouse have made up, but your parents remember it. And they think, that guy who married my daughter is a terrible human being. And then you're wondering, why do they not like my spouse? Well, it's your fault. It's because you got on the phone and in the midst of a fight and you were complaining and saying what a horrible human being your spouse was, looking for approbation, someone to come in on your side. And then once you made up, they're still there.
But and then so here's it again, it's another, the reason why that's just true is because if you look at relationships are very clear. The Bible is very clear on the relationships between men and women, how they should be and all this sort of stuff. But unless your relationship is primarily between, God is the father of your relationship and he gives us both the role to play out in it, you'll never get into that situation. You will go back to each other to try and resolve and to try and get through things. Whereas to constantly seek support and, like a fan club in an argument. Lizzie and I disagree, not fan disagree.
Club, that's a good way of putting it.
But we have very, very different ways of communicating with people. I am very, very open. Like I will tell pretty much anyone, how my last bowel movement was. I'm very just like that as a person. Whereas Lizzie is just not like that.
Thank God.
She's not closed off to all. She's very open, but she doesn't feel it necessary to involve a lot of people in her life who she doesn't know or go out and look for it. And she says, you've got to be very careful. It's her advice to me all the time is like, just be careful who you give your generosity to and your spirit to, because sometimes it will be used against you. And she is right. I know she's right. And we've had some massive, not arguments, but we have massive discussions about these sort of things. And there's so much merit in both ways looking at it. Ultimately, she's wiser. I've got bad news for you. It's 1655 at 1700. Father Calvin Robinson. We can cut this bit out. But
just leave it there. Listen.
Wait. At 1700. This is. But wait, I need to say something first. I'm just going to forget that bit. I'll come in on the back, Lizzie. Okay. So we have these big discussions about it, and as you just said, we're nibbling around the edges. So this, I would like to be. How does a Christian cope with anger? What is our defense against those that wish to attack us that we've talked about today in much greater depth and nibbled around the edges? So part 1 and part 2 next week, I want us to talk about, to get really into the weeds of it, about what we do about this situation. That's what I want to know, because I feel a bit rudderless, and I don't want to set the wrong forest on fire. if wanting to misquote James for you.
Oh, I think it's a good use of James. Again, Ephesians 4:26 says, "Be angry and do not sin." And there's a kind of milquetoast Christianity that's been promoted, which is no Christianity at all, that is weak, that is beta, that is limp, that is meaningless. And Scripture defines God's word, to come back to words, as living and as sharp as a two-edged sword. So when it's saying, don't take God's name in vain, it means don't use it trivially. Don't use it trivially. That words matter. Words matter. And the use of my name, says God, matters. If you use it, it better be because you're talking about me in a holy way. I will not have you reducing my name to an expletive. And if you do, there will be judgment, for that. So I think that's significant. And as for being angry, there are things happening in your country, in my country, and in the Western world that if you are not angered, then there is something seriously broken with you morally. And there are some people who seem to think, in your country and mine, who seem to think it's virtuous, that somehow they're above the fray because they aren't troubled by these things, and they can speak into it in such calm and almost sedative like tones. And I'm like, no, I'm angry. A man was shot in the throat. People are being raped by gangs. Freedom is being suppressed all over the Western world. There are evil people doing evil things. I'm angry. And I'm angry because I'm a Christian. Not in spite of it. I'm angry because of it.
Good for you. And also, I think that those are the people that would have been the generals that sent the tens of thousands of people to die in pointless battles for no apparent reason in 1914. They would just go, send them over the top. They righteously angry, probably at dinner, but they did it. Anyway, I love you.
All right, buddy. Let me take us out.
Yeah.
This has been another episode of WTF, World of Taunton and Fox. Taunton, he's Fox. And it's been a pleasure to be with you, and we look forward to being with you on a much more regular basis.
We look forward to it. We're back into the new term now, and the weather's going to come in, and we're going to sit and I want to get to the bottom of some big things. I love you, Larry, and I can't wait to see you. I'm going to come and see you in a couple of weeks. Woohoo!
Yep, looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right,
take care, my friend.